We have an active shooter.
Let's go ahead and declare this a mass casualty.
Welcome to Active Shooter, a podcast that covers the whys, the hows, and the aftermath of active shooter and mass casualty events.
They have an active shooter in the building. A second call says they are being attacked.
I've been shot.
16910 means we got shots fired. 4:15 a.m. Route 291 sounded like an automatic firearm.
Active shooter, reports of an active shooter
Of mass casualty incidents.
Thank you for listening.
You are listening to Active Shooter, a podcast that may contain adult themes, explicit language, and graphic depictions of violence. Portions of this show may be traumatic for those under 18. Listener discretion is advised.
We are following the breaking news out of Texas, and it is heartbreaking news. 14 students and one teacher are dead, killed after a shooting at an elementary school in Uvalde, Texas, just west of San Antonio. That is according to Texas Governor Greg Abbott. According to Governor Abbott, the gunman is also dead. Abbott saying that the 18-year-old abandoned his vehicle and entered Robb Elementary School with a handgun he may also have had.
What have we learned over the course of hundreds of mass shootings? Education, gun control, thoughts and prayers are all lovely in theory, but individually, they aren't working on their own. The best we've managed to do thus far is try to minimize the damage by training, teaching, and practicing active shooter drills. We rely on the first responders who train, sometimes for hundreds of hours. Those training hours result in a swift response that has prevented possibly thousands of lives from being lost. However, we have almost never seen a shooting that was as poorly responded to as the case we are sharing today. We've rarely, if ever, seen such a callous lack of action. Many players in today's case were severely derelict in their duties that tragic day. Worse, nearly everything that could go wrong went wrong. Almost every red flag we've learned to identify in an active shooter was wildly waving, demanding attention be called to this young man who was on a very obvious and clear path of destruction. It is the most tragic of all tragedies, made exponentially worse by the wholly inept response. The shooting at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, will go down as one of the worst in history, mostly because of how egregiously it was handled. Because there is so much material to discuss, the episode will be covered in two parts. Part 1 will detail the actual shooting, as well as background information on each of the 21 shooting victims. Part 2 will examine the shooter's background and the investigation into and aftermath of the shooting.
Active Shooter, the podcast, is a High Five Holly production, and I'm your host, JT. If you've listened to our prior episodes, you know that the Active Shooter podcast team has taken the No Notoriety Pledge, and we will not be sharing the real name of the shooters that we cover. We will be giving the shooters a pseudonym and refer to them by that name throughout the episode. This will help in clearing up any confusion in the story, while remaining true to our pledge in not naming the shooter by their actual name.
We will refer to today's shooter as Zach. Uvalde, Texas is approximately 80 miles west of San Antonio and 54 miles east of the Mexican border. The city covers a total area of 7.6 square miles, and as of the 2020 census, the population, which is almost 80% Hispanic or Latino, was 15,217 residents. Nearly 29% of the population lives below the poverty line, and properties and home values range from $100,000 to $500,000, making significant disparities between higher income versus low income families. The Robb Elementary School was a part of the Uvalde Consolidated Independent School District and had residential neighborhoods bordering 3 sides of the school property. Perhaps the town's greatest claim to fame is that actor Matthew McConaughey was born and raised there. Tuesday, May 24th, 2022, was a typical late spring day. The temperature was holding steady at around 90 degrees most of the day, with periods of cloudiness. Though the weather was serene and nearly perfect in southern Texas, the atmosphere around the country had been heavy. A mere 10 days earlier, 10 people were murdered in a hate crime mass shooting at the Top Supermarket in Buffalo, New York, which we covered in episode 81. There was hardly sufficient time to process the first tragedy before the second occurred, and each happened for very different reasons, and both were responded to very differently. The shooting at the Robb Elementary School rocked the community to its very core, and the reverberations were felt all over the country. May 24th was one of the last days of the school year, and as such, end-of-the-year testing was complete, and it was awards day. Students were filled with excitement and beyond eager to begin their summer breaks, carefree and happy, as children and young people should be. Some students would be leaving after a half day, while others gathered inside various classrooms watching movies. Away from the school, 18-year-old Zach was having a very different morning. A week earlier, Zach tagged a 15-year-old model on Instagram in a photo with numerous firearms. The pair somewhat knew each other, but had never met in person since she lived in Germany. On the morning of the shooting, he sent her a message writing, quote, "I'll text you in an hour, but you have to respond. I have a little secret I want to tell you." While this seems innocent enough on the surface, Zach had a most disturbing secret. He was fighting with his grandma that morning, arguing over the phone bill. While his grandmother was on the phone with AT&T at 11:15 a.m., Zach sent another private message to the girl, telling her that he was going to shoot his grandma. He'd been living with his grandparents for months, and his grandma was threatening to remove him from her phone plan. She was fed up. All Zach's grandmother asked was that he pay his own part, which is what spurred the bickering back and forth. Zach clearly felt he shouldn't have to pay for himself. At 11:21 a.m., he messaged the girl again, this time simply telling her, quote, "I just shot my grandma in her head." It was blunt and chilling. The third and final message said that he was going to shoot up an elementary school. Zach wasn't lying. He had truly shot his very own grandmother, the woman who took him in, cared for him, and tried teaching him responsibility. She managed to make it to her neighbor's home, begging for help, which arrived and airlifted her to a hospital in San Antonio. Despite the lack of a driver's license, Zach stole his grandmother's black 2008 Ford F-150 truck, racing away from the house with his Daniel Defense DDM 4V7 AR-15 style firearm, tucked into the seat next to him. He wore a tactical vest that was used for carrying ammunition, and he had a backpack that matched his all-black attire. He also carried another rifle along with 7 30-round magazines. At 11:28 a.m., Zach crashed the truck through a barricade and into a drainage ditch that was made of concrete. Leaving one of the rifles behind, Zach climbed from the truck, undeterred from the mission at hand. Nearby the school was a funeral home, where there were 2 men standing outside, and they happened to see Zach crash the truck, and immediately they thought to offer assistance in some way. Each man was wholly unprepared for what would come their way. Zach saw the men approaching and instantly started firing at them. The men turned and ran for safety, and it was about this time that the initial 911 calls started rolling in, including a call from the funeral home. Surveillance footage from the exterior of the funeral home was obtained for investigative purposes. Zach continued towards the school, and at 11:30 a.m., he was captured on the funeral home surveillance camera tossing his backpack over the 5-foot-tall fence that surrounded the perimeter of the school property. He then proceeded to climb the fence and hop to the other side without issue. Meanwhile, a school resource officer, or SRO, heard a 911 call on his scanner and immediately drove to the school. In a cruel twist of fate, the SRO actually passed Zach in his pursuit of the gunman. The wrong gunman. Zach was crouched behind a vehicle in the parking lot by that time, leading the SRO to incorrectly believe a teacher was the shooter. Outside of the school, Coach Yvette Silva was enjoying recess with a third-grade class when the coach noticed a male dressed in black from head to toe throw a backpack over the fence and then climb over. As soon as he landed on the other side of the fence, he aimed and fired. Coach Silva acted without hesitation, racing back into the school where she entered her classroom and called over the school radio, quote, "Coach Silva to office. Somebody just jumped over the fence and he's shooting." She ran back outside and ordered the students to lock down. Because she had just radioed to the front office, Coach Silva kept expecting to hear the lockdown announcement, but she didn't hear it right away, or as quickly as one would expect. However, several teachers later reported hearing a lockdown alert, but either way, this appears to be one of the first of many failures to protect. At this same time, Zach was in the 4th grade teacher's parking lot, still shooting, and at 11:31 a.m., he was seen on surveillance dodging in between cars, which is where he was at the time law enforcement arrived at the crash scene. At 11:33 a.m., Zach entered the school from an exterior door, located in the West Hall. The door had been propped open, but when another teacher spotted Zach walking towards the school, they shut the door. Unfortunately, it didn't lock automatically, as it was supposed to, thereby allowing Zach complete access to carry out his deranged plan. It's yet another glaring failure. As he stalked the hallway, gun aimed and ready, Zach approached rooms 111 and 112. He began to fire the weapon again, shooting a stream of bullets into the classrooms, one which was filled with kids watching the movie Lilo and Stitch. It was so pure and wholesome, which is a stark contrast to the evil that hunted them. These young children that survived became adults in an instant. The entire ordeal was beyond petrifying for those students and teachers. Zach fired over 100 rounds in under 3 minutes. It must have sounded like a war zone, except it was an elementary school filled with children. Because the security camera inside the school was positioned at an odd angle, it was difficult to determine which room Zach entered first, but it's believed to have been room 111. Back inside the school, Zach was inside classroom 111, which had a door connecting it to room 112. One of the survivor witnesses reported later that teacher Irma Garcia attempted to lock the door, but as she was doing so, Zach shot out the window of the door and strode towards Irma, effectively backing her into a corner. He looked at Irma, said good night, and shot and killed her.
A bullet came through the wall. It went in between Gillis and Stacy. It went past my arm and hit the table. We were quiet under the table. I was crying just a little bit. I was just scared because I thought he would come in our room and shoot everybody.
Another survivor witness reported hearing Zach say, quote, "You're all gonna die," as he entered the classroom and before opening fire. The heart-wrenching sounds of children screaming filled the air, mingling with the sounds of the high-powered rifle blasts. Chillingly, students later reported that Zach played sad music throughout the shooting. Eventually, the constant gunfire slowed to fewer and more deliberate shots.
He's inside the school shooting at the kids!
Uvalde County 911. Hello, ma'am. Can you hear me?
There's a school shooting.
Yes, I'm aware. I was talking to you earlier. You're still there in your room? You're still in room 112?
Yeah.
Okay, you stay on the line with me. Do not disconnect.
Can you tell the police to come to my room?
I already told them to go to the room. We're trying to get someone to you. If you hear anyone come in that they're not supposed to be, if they don't say that they're police, y'all pretend that you are asleep, okay?
At 11:35 a.m., 3 Uvalde Police Department officers entered the West Hall through the exact same door as Zach, and a minute later, another 4 officers entered the school through the south door entrance, while yet another 4 officers entered through the west door. In case you weren't counting, that is 11 officers that entered the school simultaneously.
Hey, we're going in or we're staying here? What are we doing? This building right here, brother, this building! We gotta get in the Am I bleeding? Am I bleeding? Am I bleeding? Am I bleeding? Hey, watch windows! Watch windows!
Zach had fired well over 100 rounds at this point. The actual shooting, which probably felt like a slow-motion nightmare, lasted only a few minutes in total. The officers who entered the school didn't appear to carry any breaching tools, ballistic shield, medical equipment, or go bags. A go bag is often carried by police who are responding to critical situations and contain breaching tools, spare ammo, and medical equipment. This appears to be another failure. This time should have been spent adequately preparing for entry. As the police approached Zach, he fired 11 rounds, and the officers ran for cover. The time was 11:37 a.m. when Zach hunkered down in the classroom, filled with the bodies of the children he'd just murdered. He locked the door and proceeded to wait out the police. The poor children who survived the shooting had to lay in the same room as the man who was trying to kill them. They were forced to stay as quiet and still as possible, silently praying the man didn't notice their small bodies were still breathing.
When he went in the classroom, he said, "You're all gonna die," and he just started shooting. I was playing dead, so he won't shoot me. He shot my teacher, and then he shot the kids. I think he was aiming at me, like the thing, and then he, I guess one of the chairs were there, so it blocked it, and pieces in my leg. I kind of don't feel safe going to school, and I feel hot, and sometimes at night I have nightmares too.
One 11-year-old girl thought to smear the blood of one of her deceased classmates onto her own body, attempting to make herself appear dead too. The complete and utter horror of such an act is devastating. The entire hour that those children played dead, armed police sat outside the classroom and school, waiting for further orders. At one point, Zach re-entered the hallway and fired bullets into room 109, which was locked. He shot through the window of that door, striking a student in the nose, which caused an injury, but didn't kill them. The student can still recall the crunching noise of his nose shattering from a whizzing bullet. Zach went back into rooms 111 and 112. Shots were heard at 11:37, 11:38, 11:40, and 11:44 a.m. At 11:43 a.m., the school was officially placed on lockdown after the sounds of gunfire could be heard. While it's already been mentioned, this was a massive failure on the part of the school officials. The initial shots were reported at 11:31 a.m. When the shooting was investigated later by a special committee appointed by the Texas House of Representatives, the report that was released indicated that an officer had a clear shot at Zach before he entered the school, but the officer didn't take the shot because he was waiting for supervisory approval to do so. Approval that never came. Between 11:52 a.m. and 12:21 p.m., 4 different ballistic shields were carried into the school. However, only the last one carried in was rifle-rated, which means it could withhold rifle fire. That shield had been provided by the United States Marshals. Nearly the entire time he was inside the school, Chief Arredondo searched for a master key that worked for every classroom door. It was this search that delayed the breach of the classroom so severely. This was yet one more failure to the students and faculty. At 12:15 p.m., approximately 19 officers gathered in the school hallway. Yet they were still no closer to breaching the classroom because the incident commander believed they needed more manpower and more equipment before they could breach. 3 additional gunshots were heard over an open 911 call at 12:21 p.m. For nearly 10 minutes, the Uvalde Consolidated Independent School District Chief Pedro Pete Arredondo spoke in both English and Spanish, trying to negotiate with Zach, who never once even responded to the efforts to communicate. Finally, at 12:50 p.m., an ad hoc team breached the classroom. Ad hoc is a Latin term that means for this. The ad hoc team is created for the specific purpose of responding to emergency situations, or quite literally, for this. At the same time the team entered the classroom, Zach emerged from the closet he was hiding in. There was an exchange of gunfire and Zach was struck and killed. He was reported dead at 12:50 p.m. Immediately, police began to remove the casualties and evacuate survivors. In total, 376 law enforcement officers from 23 different agencies responded to the school. The classrooms looked like an actual war zone. There were very noticeable bullet holes puncturing the walls, and an exceptional amount of blood saturating the floors and desks. 19 students and 2 teachers were murdered, and another 18 were injured. Nine-year-old Eliana, Ellie, Amaya Garcia, was a sweet, benevolent young girl. She loved her family, but particularly enjoyed spending time with her grandparents. She aspired to be a cheerleader one day, but she also loved to play basketball. Her favorite colors were purple and pink, and her meal of choice was ramen noodles. Ellie was a darling child who will be desperately missed. Jacqueline, Jackie, Jalen Cazares, was a thoughtful 9-year-old singer in the making, who was very talented at making TikTok videos. Jackie had 4 dogs, but truly cherished animals of all kinds, and even planned to be a veterinarian one day. She dreamt of traveling to Paris, and the fact that she will never realize her dreams is sorrowful. Jackie went out of her way to help others, and that generous spirit will never be forgotten. 10-year-old Nevaeh Alyssa Bravo was a funny and exuberant girl who adored her family and spent as much time with them as she could. She often helped her dad out with chores around the house, and unlike many kids, she really enjoyed doing it because she just liked being around her family that much. Putting a smile on other people's faces made her happy, and Nevaeh was great at making others smile. Her preferred activities were riding her bike and playing softball, and her favorite colors were pink and purple. Nevaeh will be missed by every single person who she encountered. McKenna Lee Elrod was a 10-year-old who was truly the light of her family's lives. Her most treasured moments were the times she was at the ranch with her dad, and the considerate young lady thrilled in leaving little notes around the house for her family to find. Her favorite color was purple, and McKenna was a gymnast and a softball player. All that knew McKenna are devastated in the wake of her loss, and she will be deeply mourned. Jose Manuel Flores Jr. was 10 years old when he was robbed from the family that loved the good-natured boy. An honor roll student who wanted to become a police officer one day. He only wanted to help others. Jose was an incredible big brother who appreciated getting to help care for his siblings. His family, friends, and all his loved ones will miss Jose. 10-year-old Uzziah Sergio Garcia was a gregarious boy who was extremely considerate of his friends and brothers, more so than most young kids. He exuded life and light and was very active. Indeed, he played sports such as football, swimming, and loved running. The Nintendo Switch was his favorite video game system, and he was likely very good with it. Uzziah deeply cared for his family and friends, and they all long for his energetic presence. 10-year-old Amory Jo Garza was a wonderful older sister to her 3-year-old brother, and was quite protective over him. The thoughtful and lively young Amory was already proficient at drawing and enjoyed swimming and going to Starbucks for vanilla bean frappuccinos. She had big plans to become a teacher one day. She loved learning and wanted to inspire that in others. Amory's family will anguish over their loss forever. 10-year-old Xavier James Lopez was a very active boy that loved to swim, but was particularly a dedicated baseball enthusiast who also played on Blue Jays' Little League team. A spirited and lively boy, Xavier was known for wearing stylish clothes and would break into a dance whenever the mood struck. His smile was so striking it instantly made others grin. The brightest light in every room, Xavier will be remembered forever, and each time his family dances, his spirit will dance too. J.C. Carmelo Luevanos was a very popular boy who could often be found running around and playing in his yard at home. An active kid, J.C. was incredibly considerate and would leave notes for his grandparents telling him how much he loved them. He thought it was the greatest thing when he got to make his grandparents a pot of coffee, which they loved to drink. A dinosaur enthusiast, 10-year-old J.C. was taken from this world much too soon, and his family and friends will miss him greatly. Tess Marie Mata was a born athlete who was a gifted gymnast, and she loved doing backbends. She also played soccer and softball and was a massive Houston Astros fan. Jose Altuve was her favorite player to cheer for, which she did every chance she got when she was watching the game. Tess dreamed of going to Disney World and was even saving every cent she got for that dream trip with her family. This lovely 10-year-old should have been able to take that trip, and it's completely heartbreaking that she was robbed of that, and so much more. Tess will never be forgotten. 10-year-old Alithia Haven Ramirez was an aspiring artist who already had an extraordinary talent, and she planned to attend art school in Paris one day. She was talented enough that it probably would have happened. Already a true role model for her siblings, Alithia was accommodating and attentive to those in her small world, and though she didn't get a long life, she made an impact in the time she was here. 10-year-old Annabelle Guadalupe Rodriguez was an empath. She was a true blue friend who was there for anyone in need. Her favorite color was blue. She loved butterflies, but her latest favorite passion was watching TikTok videos with her sisters. Extremely intelligent, she was an honor roll student who took her studies seriously. Annabelle was such a sweet soul, who will be fondly remembered by all that knew her. Mayte Juliana Rodriguez was a 10-year-old animal lover who was deeply interested in learning about animals in the ocean. Her favorite animals were dogs, dolphins, and whales. an honor roll student that dreamt of attending Texas A&M to become a marine biologist, and she probably would have helped change the world. Her favorite color was green, and while she was competitive, Mayte was extremely compassionate, and she will be missed deeply. Alexandria Lexi Anaya Rubio was a bright and dedicated 10-year-old who was a straight-A student and planned to be a lawyer one day. She probably would have accomplished so much, but the young lady with the infectious smile was taken too soon. But she will never be forgotten. 10-year-old Jayla Nicole Silguero was a TikTok enthusiast who enjoyed making videos and sharing them with her friends and family. A nature lover who preferred the outdoors, Jayla was a bright light, extinguished much too soon. Eliana Torres was such a lovely and considerate young girl who was happy making others laugh. A natural-born leader, Eliana was an incredible softball player who was a proud member of the All-Star team. Her friends and family will miss her charitable heart. 10-year-old Rogelio Fernandez Torres was a precocious boy who was extremely positive and happy. He loved playing outside, especially football. His passion was playing Pokemon, and he was always eager for a game. Rogelio's family will miss him. Layla Marie Salazar was a young singer who loved to dance. Funny and upbeat, she particularly enjoyed swimming and running, but her favorite activity was going out for tacos with her grandparents. Layla was only 11 years old when she was suddenly taken from the family who miss her and yearned to see her dance just once more. 11-year-old Miranda Gale Mathis was bright and kind, but very shy. A tomboy who loved the color purple and all things unicorns and mermaids, her favorite times were spent playing outdoors. Known to have a vivid imagination, Miranda was a spectacular young lady who will be missed by all. 44-year-old Eva Mireles was a teacher who was dedicated to her profession for over 17 years. She was deeply into CrossFit and maintaining a healthy lifestyle that included taking long hikes. Eva loved her family, but her very best friend was her dog Kane. She was exceedingly dedicated to her students, and this was proven on May 24th, 2022, when she died protecting her young students, who she clearly loved like her own. Irma Linda Garcia was a 48-year-old teacher who was an exceptionally selfless woman. A wife and mother to 4 children, Irma was always known to jump in and lend a hand. Didn't really matter what you were asking of her. She was a long-time teacher, giving 23 years of herself to help shape and nurture young minds. She, too, died protecting her students, which is truly the most self-sacrificing thing a teacher can give a student. She would probably do it 100 times if needed. We will conclude episode 1 here, but stay tuned for part 2. Coming soon.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Active Shooter, the podcast. Remember, if you see something, say something. There's no telling how many lives you may be saving. A big thank you to Darren Curtis, who composed some of the songs on our show. You can find him online at www.darrencurtismusic.com. Make sure to check us out on social media. You can find us on Facebook at Active Shooter, the podcast, and on Twitter at Podcast Active. Thank you, and be safe.